other people are doing. So I know this particular human subjects comparison, it took a while, like a little too late for my personal taste. I would have preferred to do this last week, but the problem was there were some logistical issues. Well, I say logistical, it was just the fact that I forgot about the right combination of phones to take photos, which is why I ended up taking the wrong pair last weekend, and then I had to do the right ones, which are these two phones, this weekend. So it's a whole little issue that is entirely my fault, but regardless, we're here now. We have the comparison ready. So here's the deal with these two phones. I think that the Xiaomi 15 Ultra is a fantastic device, and as a whole, overall as a smartphone, I think it's actually much more user-friendly as opposed to the X200 Ultra for obvious reasons. It doesn't have a global release, the Vivo that is. And thing is, as a camera, I still prefer the X200 Ultra. That's a pretty huge deal. I'm not gonna daily drive it, but at the end of the day, I still think that the Xiaomi is not nearly as, I'd say, as interesting of a camera as the X200 Ultra. Both have their pros and cons. And by the way, if you want to check out the photography comparison with the day and night photos and everything else involving the cameras outside of human subjects, obviously, well then that comparison is already done. The link in the description, and also hopefully in the comments if I don't forget. It's gonna take you to the playlist and you can check it out for yourself. It's a huge comparison with a lot of details, and I'd say that in that case we had some revelations, to say the least. Now in this case, in case of human subjects, it's going to be pretty similar. So let's jump in, shall we? Alright, starting off fairly simple. This is a regular photograph of yours truly, and I'd say that there are quite a few interesting things going on. But first and foremost, the 35mm situation with the X200 Ultra. Now for human subjects, it's absolute perfection. I don't think I could ever complain about 35mm that you can just have optical zoom on with the X200 Ultra. It is absolutely perfect for regular photos, and you have a very small crop to 50mm, which is essentially 2x, and 50mm is, in my opinion, perfect. It is the exact same focal length I'm using on my camera right now. And also you'll notice that we have some very nice and natural bokeh and depth of field happening on the X200 Ultra. It's not as much on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, despite the Xiaomi having a much larger sensor. And secondly, of course, we have the color profile situation. Now, I only took Leica authentic shots in this particular case, but I really wanted to drive this home. In case of regular photos of, let's say, landscapes, architecture, and so on and so forth, anything that does not involve human subjects, the Xiaomi's Leica authentic is one of my all-time favorites. No two ways about it. But when it comes to actual human subjects, especially in sort of indoors lighting like in this situation right here, I would say that the Xiaomi suffers quite a bit. Because more than anything else, it tends to crush shadows and also some of the midtones to really just, it looks too dark and it just doesn't look appealing, not nearly enough. Now on the X200 Ultra on the other hand, we have Zeiss's natural colors, which is by far the most natural and authentic color profile in the history of mankind, and it works tremendously well, as you can probably tell. Now would I like maybe a pinch more contrast on the Vivo? Sure, but overall it is much more appealing to look at. It's got so much more of a natural look with the skin tones, the contrast balance, the exposure, everything really. Now this whole color profile situation actually carries over to portraits, but in case of selfies, we don't really get access to any of the Leica color options. So this is just regular colors that you can have. On the X200 Ultra, for the first time ever on any Vivo device, we actually have full color profile options when it comes to selfies. And actually everything like selfies, night mode, portraits, everything has every single color profile. And that level of flexibility, it's hard to beat. I think that may well be the reasoning behind the sheer level of consistency that we have this time around on the X200 Ultra. I'd wager that having Zeiss's natural colors, which is in my opinion the best color profile to use on any Vivo flagship, to have it on selfies as well, it really improves the overall consistency and the skin tones. Now, will it be perfect every single time? Perhaps not, nothing is, but it gets bloody close, way closer to perfection as opposed to the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, which is honestly quite a big deal. It really doesn't matter the lighting situation because Vivo consistently nails the contrast and exposure. The skin tones, in most cases it is absolute perfection, but sometimes I have noticed that it might give you a bit of a yellowish skin tone. Now in this case, in these selfies particularly, I haven't really noticed much of that, but well, it can happen. And hell, even when it comes to dynamic range, you can see it's just a pinch better as opposed to the Xiaomi. The highlight preservation is just a little bit ahead. And these small differences do stack up. Now when it comes to selfie portraits, in a very similar fashion, the Vivo X200 Ultra is able to just maintain absolute perfection, or well, at least as close to it as you can possibly get in terms of color profile and also our contrast. Now the Xiaomi obviously suffers quite a bit. You can see that in a lot of places, a lot of cases, by itself it might be a fairly good selfie, but comparatively speaking, it's got a lot of flaws. It's so washed out in many situations. And of course, you might have also noticed that the field of view on the Xiaomi has shrunk quite a bit, because in regular selfies, what happens is you get a much wider field of view, which I really like on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. But then when you go to portraits, you actually lose out on that field of view, which is one of the saddest things. To be entirely honest, it is just... I really, really despise when you're forced to just use a smaller field of view with portraits. Like, just give us the option. You can crop in to take a portrait, maybe to frame it a little bit better, have no distortion, so on and so forth. But let us also take a wider selfie, because I really, really prefer a much wider selfie, to have the camera as far away from me as possible. Now I would say the one thing I do enjoy about the Xiaomi 15 Ultra is that sometimes its bokeh is absolute perfection. It can really nail that. The X200 Ultra, in most cases, it has a very stylish look with the bokeh. I've got the Zeiss swirl bokeh going on, and in most cases it does look really nice. But in some cases it just doesn't work out, like in this one. But let's face it, despite the bokeh looking slightly better on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, sure, the X200 Ultra, it just goes way farther when it comes to consistency. And honestly, with human subjects especially, you really need the absolute highest level of consistency to have any kind of good results. Having said that though, I would say that night selfies is not good on the X200 Ultra. It's got issues, to say the very least. Night selfies has never been good on the Vivo. Just to be very clear, I don't think I've ever had a Vivo device that has had good night selfies, and unfortunately they have still not gotten anywhere near it. Now the Xiaomi, it's not perfect, but it's better as opposed to the X200 Ultra at the very least. Like, the amount of artifacting in the sky is so much less as opposed to the Vivo. It's quite something. Now when it comes to night selfie portraits, I think it's safe to say that the Vivo is doing a much better job than expected, isn't it? Because this time I'd say it's basically on par with the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. There's some weirdness going on with the light on my face. It was much warmer than what it appears to be on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. And yes, it's like 100 degrees out there. No wonder I'm sweating. But also, edge detection definitely a little bit better on the X200 Ultra. I know it's not the same angle, but yeah, for the most part, it was actually easier on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra as opposed to the X200 Ultra, based on the background that is. But it is still messing up. Now, when it comes to rear camera portraits, here's the interesting thing. The X200 Ultra once again has complete access to all the color profiles, vivid, Zeiss natural colors, textured mode. Without a doubt, I would say that Zeiss natural colors is the way to go. It gives you the most natural, most consistent skin tones, fairly good contrast, and overall, it's the best way to go. No two ways about it. On the Xiaomi, however, we have two very distinctive color profiles. We've got Leica Portraits, which is exactly what you're looking at here, and then of course Master Portraits. Now I would suggest that, especially when it comes to indoors lighting, Master Portraits is going to be better for obvious reasons. We once again have a very similar issue with regards to too much contrast and too much of the shadows being crushed on the Xiaomi when you're trying to use Leica Portraits. It has never been the Xiaomi's forte when it comes to portraits and human subjects in general, because it stylizes things maybe a little too much. So there is that to consider. The processing is not really able to handle human subjects quite as well, especially if you want to use like authentic or like a portraits, as we saw previously as well. But when you're taking outdoor portraits, it's a very different story, because now the Xiaomi is producing a much nicer shot, in my personal opinion. Leica Portraits is doing tremendously good, and it's better, at least for my personal taste. I like the much higher contrast that we're getting on the Xiaomi in this case. But then of course you must be wondering, what about the Master Portrait? Outdoors? Well, in this case, as you can probably tell, it's not that nice. It's way too saturated, the skin tones are far too warm, and the contrast, although similar, I still prefer the way it was balanced on Leica Portraits. Yes, when you're outside and you have direct sunlight, then Leica Portraits works better. But then in basically any other normal lighting situation where you're not directly getting hit by sunlight or any kind of big light source, Master Portrait does seem to be a little bit better. To think that you really need to consider the whole lighting situation and then determine the color profile that you're going to use for your portraits before you even shoot your photograph. That's too much hassle. Like it's not supposed to be this problematic to take a good portrait shot, now is it? I mean, the Vivo's really a case in point. Now, in certain insane backlit situations, somehow the Xiaomi is managing to pull ahead, while the X200 Ultra is way too overprocessed. I mean, what the hell is even going on with my face? I don't know. It's just too much processing, plain and simple. But of course, once again, when we move back inside, it's very obvious that the Xiaomi struggles way too much with Leica portraits. And as much as I would prefer to use Leica portraits, maybe when I'm shooting in sunlight, but when I'm indoors, there's no two ways about it. Master portraits is the way to go. Now, if you thought that was the end of it, well, think again, because when it comes to the 50mm mode, which is essentially 2x on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, as opposed to, well, not exactly 2x, because 35 to 50 is not a 2x sensor crop at the very least, but it is a bit of a crop, and essentially you get good shots overall in terms of detail preservation on both. I have nothing to complain there, but there's a lot of other things to complain about on the Xiaomi, because look, I think at this point it's more than obvious that the X200 Ultra is the one to go for when it comes to human subjects. I've got a lot of other samples, but overall the consistency problems and the weird issues that we have with colors, it's quite an issue on the Xiaomi, and Vivo has just constantly made strides with this stuff. These are the results you can expect when you go to a mall. That's sad. That should not be the case. These should be the areas where both phones should, in theory, would perform almost equally as well. In case of very high level of sunlight, maybe falling on your face, or maybe it's a backlit shot, maybe it's a challenging shot, then I can understand some level of inconsistency. But again, you're probably not going to take a backlit portrait most of the time. You're going to take regular portraits, where the Vivo is miles ahead as opposed to the Xiaomi. And the sad part is, Xiaomi is the one with the global release, so I really wish it was the opposite. Whether it's the 85mm or the 170mm on the Vivo, and the equivalents on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, obviously, it's just gonna be significantly more consistent, significantly better to use on a regular basis for any regular person. I don't see how the Xiaomi could ever even hope to compete when it comes to human subjects and portrait mode in particular. But regardless, let us wrap up with night portraits. I didn't really think it was going to be this much of a slam dunk, but well, this is just the way it is. Now, in case of night portraits, I'd say that the X200 Ultra is going to be the one that is most flattering, as you would expect, but the Xiaomi is actually not doing horribly. That's the best way to put it. It's not bad, not in the slightest. I would say it's retaining the nighttime look a little too well, to the point that it kind of looks like I'm in a horror movie, but well, even with this shot with the telephoto cameras, you can probably tell the Xiaomi 15 Ultra has a lot of contrast, which I do like and I do appreciate that a lot. But I can tell you right now, majority of the people are gonna go for the X200 Ultra, which, yes, I didn't address this much previously, but it does appear to have some level of skin smoothing happening. Maybe that's because of the way the contrast is balanced, because I checked by cropping all the way into my face, which I'm not gonna do on screen. It's not something I want in my videos, but I don't think it's really smoothening the skin. It's just that the contrast roll-off is very, very gentle, as opposed to the Xiaomi, which is kind of heavy-handed with it, as you can probably tell. So it might look like it's smoothening things out, but it's really not. It's just, I would say, a very professional approach that it has when it comes to contrast balance with portraits and selfies in particular on the Vivo. Alright, that brings us to the end of this comparison. So it's well, I didn't think it would be this one-sided once again. It's honestly, I had expected the Xiaomi to have gotten a little bit better than this, at least. Now, I know the Xiaomi is always going to be plagued with inconsistencies. That's kind of the way it goes. But I had hoped quite a bit that it would have gotten a little bit better with updates and so on, because I kind of feel like it used to perform better, but maybe because we went a little too in-depth, it just really showcased its flaws. It could also be that the Vivo is just so damn good that it's just trouncing any attempt that the Xiaomi is trying to make here. That could be the case. I'm not really sure. It could be a combination of the two. Maybe the Vivo is really good and the Xiaomi is kind of inconsistent in most of these cases in a particular comparison here. Maybe. But whatever the situation, what I can tell you very simply is that In most cases, across the board in this comparison, it's not just that I preferred how the Vivo looked. It's also the fact that in majority of these cases, I would have deleted the image I got on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. I'm not even joking. These are not good images. Now, in most cases, I don't take human subjects, so for me, the Xiaomi is still not too shabby. And as a camera for the kind of subjects that I use it for, let's say taking photos of still life, landscapes, architecture, all that kind of stuff that doesn't involve humans, sure, it's fine. It's actually a really good camera for that specifically. But for human subjects, it's very obvious. Vivo takes the cake. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed, found this helpful, because I sure as hell did. And I'll see you guys soon enough with more. Cheers.